Let me guess. You cooked this? No wonder it tastes cheap, Maxwell Harrington III sneered, deliberately pushing the plate away with such force that it toppled, spilling sauce and food across the pristine white tablecloth. Glass shattered across marble as Elise's hands trembled momentarily. Voices fell silent. Only his rage echoed through the chandeliered hall as he continued his assault. Crystal fragments caught the light like scattered diamonds while hushed whispers spread through the room. In the sudden void of sound, Elise Morgan's steady breathing seemed thunderous to her own ears. "Unacceptable," Maxwell hissed, his manicured finger jabbing at the air between them. "Absolutely unacceptable." The $10,000 per plate fundraiser at Eastbrook Hotel had been progressing flawlessly until this moment. Elise, 35, stood motionless, the weight of 300 stares burning into her back as the tech billionaire continued his tirade over what appeared to be a minor imperfection in the plating of his entree. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience," Elise began, her voice measured and professional despite the racial slur still hanging in the air. "If you'd allow me to explain the chef's intention with this particular presentation," Maxwell's hand sliced through the air, cutting off her words. "I don't pay people like you to think. Just take it back and get it right." His emphasis on "you" hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Elise felt the weight of silence as conversations halted throughout the ballroom. The heat of stares intensified as she carefully collected the plate, maintaining perfect posture despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Every step toward the kitchen doorway seemed to stretch for miles. This wasn't just any event. The annual gala for inner-city education represented crucial networking opportunities for Elise's small but acclaimed restaurant. As head chef at Savory Root, she had volunteered her services tonight as part of the mentorship program she'd helped establish for aspiring chefs from underprivileged communities. The connections made here could sustain that program for another year. Just 12 hours earlier, Elise had stood in her modest apartment, checking her daughter's college application essay before leaving for pre-event preparations. "Mom, you're doing that thing again," Amara had said, looking up from her laptop with a knowing smile. "What thing?" Elise adjusted her chef's coat, already mentally reviewing the evening's menu. "That thing where you try to look completely calm while your brain is running through 50 worst-case scenarios." Amara closed her computer. "You've got this. You always do." Elise had smiled, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "The essay looks great. Stanford would be lucky to have you. They'll be even luckier when your fancy rich people tonight write those scholarship recommendation letters," Amara replied with a wink. Now, pushing through the kitchen's swinging doors, Elise wondered if she'd just undermined those very opportunities. The kitchen hummed with controlled chaos. Line cooks calling orders, the sizzle of pans, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, her domain, her sanctuary. Zoe Williams, a 17-year-old mentee with extraordinary talent, approached immediately. "Chef, I saw what happened. What he said was—" She struggled to find words, her young face contorted with outrage. "That jerk is Maxwell Harrington III, James Reynolds said quietly, appearing at Elise's side. The 55-year-old fellow chef and longtime friend had recommended Elise for this opportunity. Tech billionaire, major donor, sits on half the charitable boards in the city. And currently facing allegations of discriminatory hiring practices, Elise added, keeping her voice low as she handed the plate to her sous chef. Though that part hasn't made the headlines yet. James frowned. "Listen, Elise, these people write the checks that keep programs like ours alive. Maybe just what?" Elise's eyes flashed momentarily before she regained her composure. "Just remember my place?" The sous chef cleared his throat uncomfortably. Elise glanced around, noticing how the kitchen staff had slowed their work, attuned to the tension. She straightened her shoulders, making a quick decision. "Let's focus on service," she said firmly. "We have 300 guests waiting for their meals, and every plate represents our standards, not theirs." She turned to the plate that had been returned. The alleged imperfection was barely perceptible, a slight inconsistency in the sauce placement. Nothing that would impact flavor or quality, merely a cosmetic detail that only the most pretentious diner would notice. That was the point, she realized. The complaint was never about the food. Elise took a deep breath, centered herself, and moved to the plating station. "Let me handle this one personally." She dismissed the sous chef with a gentle nod and began reconstructing the dish with precise, deliberate movements. "Chef Morgan, you don't have to," Zoe began. "Yes, I do." Elise arranged each element with surgical precision, transforming the already excellent dish into something undeniably exquisite. The seared scallops glistened, arranged in a perfect arc beside a vibrant puree. Microgreens added height, while a delicate sauce created visual balance. It wasn't just food, it was architecture, chemistry, and art combined. James stared at the plate. "That's the most beautiful plating I've seen all year." "Thank you." Elise lifted the plate. "Now, let's see what complaint he finds with this one." When she returned to the dining hall, the weight of the delicate china plate warmed her fingertips. Muted jazz, which had resumed after her departure, suddenly seemed discordant against the tension she carried. Maxwell was engaged in animated conversation with Catherine Palmer, the 45-year-old event organizer and board member. Elise approached with professional poise. "Your entree, sir." Maxwell didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he motioned to a young white male server nearby. Is this the corrected dish?" The server glanced uncomfortably between Maxwell and Elise. Yes, sir, Chef Morgan just—" Fine. Maxwell waved dismissively, still not making eye contact with Elise. "You can place it here." The calculated slight hung in the air. The server shot Elise an apologetic look as he took the plate from her hands and set it before Maxwell, who immediately resumed his conversation with Catherine without a word of thanks. Elise retreated, maintaining her dignified expression. Would she let this calculated slight pass? Or was this just the beginning of her response? As she moved between tables, checking on other guests' experiences, Elise noticed several diners watching her with newfound interest. A woman at table 12 caught her eye and nodded slightly, a small gesture of solidarity that Elise acknowledged with a professional smile. Back in the kitchen, the rhythm of service continued. Elise focused on maintaining excellence, personally inspecting each plate before it left her domain. The mentorship students watched her closely, learning not just culinary techniques, but how to navigate difficult situations with grace. "Chef," one of the young cooks whispered as Elise passed. "We heard what happened. Everyone's talking about it." "Then let's give them something better to talk about," Elise replied. "Let our food speak for itself." 40 minutes later, Catherine Palmer took the stage for the formal presentation portion of the evening. The projection screen behind her displayed logos of major corporate donors, including Harrington Tech prominently at the top. "We are deeply grateful for the generous support of our community partners," Catherine began, highlighting each major contributor. She praised several restaurants that had provided smaller contributions or gift certificates, then moved swiftly to the next slide without mentioning Savory Root's donation of services and training. Elise's smile remained fixed, but she noted the omission. Across the room, Maxwell smirked as Catherine stumbled over her notes, quickly moving to the next segment. During the applause, James leaned toward Elise. "That wasn't an accident." "What do you mean?" "Maxwell blocked your James Beard Community Impact nomination last year," he murmured. "He sits on that committee too." Elise felt the sticky champagne glass in her hand, heard the artificial sweetness of forced laughter around her. She discreetly took out her phone, making brief notes under the table while maintaining her attentive expression. "What are you doing?" James whispered. "Documenting patterns," she replied quietly. Across the room, Maxwell whispered to board members, occasionally glancing her way. Would anyone notice the systematic erasure happening right before their eyes? Or was Elise completely alone in this gilded battlefield? A server approached their table with dessert menus. "Chef Morgan, the sommelier has a question about the wine pairing for the chocolate course." Grateful for the excuse to step away, Elise followed the server toward the service station. As they passed Maxwell's table, she overheard him speaking to a group of influential donors. Question of maintaining proper standards. These diversity initiatives sound noble, but we must ensure they don't compromise excellence. Several heads nodded in agreement, though Elise noticed one woman frowning slightly, her gaze following Elise as she passed. In the service area, the sommelier's question turned out to be simple, a guest with specific dietary restrictions requesting alternatives. As Elise provided guidance, she noticed Jordan Pierce, the food critic from the Tribune, watching the interaction from nearby. "Chef Morgan," he acknowledged with a respectful nod. "Impressive menu tonight. Would love to discuss your mentorship program sometime." "Of course," Elise replied, handing him her card. "My assistant can arrange something next week." Pierce pocketed the card, then added casually, "Interesting dynamics tonight. I'm working on a piece about power structures in the culinary world. Your perspective would be valuable." Before Elise could respond, a commotion erupted from the main dining area. Maxwell's voice rose above the general conversation. "Excuse me, is this supposed to be medium rare?" Elise signaled for the floor manager to handle it, but Maxwell continued, "No, I want to speak with whoever's in charge of this kitchen. This is completely unacceptable." Taking a deep breath, Elise approached his table. "Mr. Harrington, how can I assist you?" Maxwell looked at her with thinly veiled contempt. If this is the quality of instruction these scholarship recipients are getting, perhaps the entire mentorship program should be reconsidered. Before Elise could respond, Catherine appeared at her side, touching her elbow gently. "Elise, perhaps we should let Executive Chef Daniels handle Mr. Harrington's concerns for the remainder of the evening?" The executive chef, the white male hotel chef who had contributed nothing to tonight's menu, stood waiting nearby. "Is this being recorded for the event documentary, Catherine?" Elise asked calmly, noting how Catherine's expression flickered with surprise. Well, yes. Portions of the evening are being filmed for promotional purposes." From across the room, Elise caught Zoe watching the exchange, her young face tightening with distress. The tightness of Elise's chef coat suddenly felt constrictive, and the metallic taste of injustice filled her mouth. Would she step back to save the program, even if it meant reinforcing the very inequalities the charity claimed to fight? "I'd be happy to address any concerns personally," Elise said to Maxwell, maintaining her professional tone. "As the menu designer and head chef for tonight's event, I'm best positioned to explain each dish's concept and execution." Maxwell's jaw tightened slightly. He hadn't expected resistance, especially with Catherine attempting to sideline her. "Fine," he said curtly. "The meat is overcooked. I specifically requested medium rare." Elise examined the cut he had barely touched. "This is medium rare, sir. Perhaps the lighting affects how you're perceiving the color, but I can assure you it was prepared to exact temperature specifications. If you'd prefer it more rare, I'd be happy to have a new portion prepared." Maxwell's nostrils flared. Several nearby diners were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "Never mind," he snapped. "Just have them clear it. I'll wait for dessert." The final course was served without Elise's direct involvement. As coffee was poured, Maxwell approached the podium for his donor's address. "Standards matter," he began, surveying the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "In business, in education, and yes, even in charity." He continued, emphasizing merit-based opportunity, while his gaze deliberately shifted toward Elise and the young mentees serving coffee at the back of the room. "We must ensure that our generosity isn't mistaken for lowering the bar. Every child deserves excellence, which means maintaining rigorous qualification standards, even in programs designed for the underprivileged." When the polite applause concluded, Elise approached the stage manager. "The program indicates a brief time for remarks from the culinary team." Maxwell overheard and interjected. "We're running behind schedule. Perhaps just a quick thank you would suffice." "Actually," Elise said, "I'd like to share some outcomes from the mentorship program that donors might find valuable." Let's hear from real experts, shall we? Maxwell gestured toward the executive chef, who looked uncomfortable with the sudden attention. The spotlight heat intensified on Elise's skin as she stood her ground. She noticed several influential food critics and journalists among the guests, some frowning at Maxwell's behavior. The microphone's weight suddenly doubled in her hand. Would Elise risk everything, her reputation, her restaurant, and the future of her protégés, by challenging a man who could destroy it all with a single phone call? The storage pantry offered momentary sanctuary. Stainless steel shelves lined with organized supplies surrounded Elise as she pressed her forehead against the cool metal. The distant clatter of plates sounded like a ticking clock, counting down to a decision she couldn't postpone. She'd been here before, different room, different man, same dismissal, always needing to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy, always walking the impossible tightrope between too aggressive and not assertive enough. The weight of being simultaneously hypervisible and invisible pressed down on her shoulders. "Chef Morgan?" A server poked his head in. "They're asking for you to confirm the dessert service timing." "I'll be right there." Alone again, Elise pulled out her phone, scrolling through emails from 3 months earlier. The confidential industry report she'd been commissioned to contribute to glowed on the screen. Statistics, interviews, documentation of systemic inequities across the hospitality industry, including damning data about Harrington's corporate culture and investments. Her finger hovered over the email from the James Beard Foundation, confirming her appointment to lead the Industry Accountability Initiative. The announcement was scheduled for next week. Only select board members knew, apparently not including Maxwell. Elise closed her eyes, remembering her daughter's experience last semester. Amara had been accused of plagiarism by a teacher who didn't believe a black student could write at such an advanced level. "Document everything," Elise had advised her. "Forward all your drafts, your research notes, timestamps. Create a paper trail they can't ignore." Amara had been vindicated, the teacher reprimanded, but the lesson lingered. Preparation beats confrontation. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Zoe stood in the doorway, her young face showing concern beyond her 17 years. "Chef, are you okay?" Elise straightened. "I'm fine. Just needed a minute." Zoe stepped inside, closing the door partially. "They're watching how you handle this, not just him." "Who's watching?" "Everyone." Zoe's voice was quiet but firm. "The other students. The servers, the donors, who aren't jerks. Me." The unexpected weight of Zoe's hand on her shoulder surprised Elise. The familiar smell of spices clung to their uniforms, a reminder of their shared passion. "We're doing our kitchen documentation assignment," Zoe continued, "for the program portfolio." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Documentation?" Zoe showed her phone briefly. "Video clips of professional kitchen dynamics, like you assigned." Understanding dawned on Elise. The mentees were filming, documenting. "You taught us our food tells our story," Zoe said. "What story are we telling tonight?" The simple question landed with surprising force. What story indeed? Elise remembered her grandmother's kitchen, where she'd first learned to cook. The woman had worked as a domestic chef for wealthy families for 40 years. Sometimes, she'd told young Elise while showing her how to make a roux, you need to let them believe they're winning until they've already lost. Her grandmother had quietly put 3 children through college on a domestic worker's salary, including Elise's mother. She'd navigated spaces where her expertise was constantly questioned while ensuring her family thrived. Another memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, sitting in a sleek conference room with hospitality industry leaders, presenting her findings on diversity initiatives. The stunned silence as she methodically laid out patterns of discrimination across major restaurant groups. The subsequent request for her to consult on reform measures. The meeting where she'd received confidential documents about Maxwell's company showing systematic discrimination, wage disparities, promotion patterns, harassment complaints, quietly settled. "Chef?" Zoe's voice pulled her back to the present. Elise checked her watch. 20 minutes until dessert service, 20 minutes to decide. She scrolled through her contacts, finding the number for Jordan Pierce, the food editor for the City Tribune, who was sitting at table 7. Her thumb hovered over the message she'd drafted earlier but hadn't sent. The glowing screen of her phone illuminated her face as she made her decision, sending a carefully worded text. For the first time in hours, she noticed the steady rhythm of her heartbeat finally calming. "Let's get back out there," Elise said to Zoe, straightening her chef's coat. "We have a service to finish." "What are you going to do about him?" Zoe asked. Elise smiled slightly. "Exactly what a chef does best. Prepare something he won't expect." As they walked back toward the kitchen, Elise paused. "Zoe, make sure all the students understand something important. How we respond to situations like this defines us more than the situation itself." "Is that why you haven't just told him off?" Zoe asked. "Because honestly, Chef, he deserves it." "He does," Elise agreed. "But this isn't about what he deserves. It's about what we deserve. Respect based on our work, not someone else's preconceptions. And sometimes winning that respect requires strategy, not just emotion." Zoe nodded slowly. "Like chess instead of checkers." "Exactly." Elise pushed open the kitchen door. "Now, let's make the dessert course so spectacular that even he can't find fault with it." The perfectly balanced dessert plate felt steady in Elise's hands as she re-entered the dining room. A delicate chocolate structure crowned the center, surrounded by elements of contrasting colors and textures. The gentle clink of silverware against china became suddenly audible in the awkward silence that fell as she approached Maxwell's table. She placed the dessert before him with precision. "Your dessert, Mr. Harrington." A deconstructed chocolate torte with cardamom-infused custard and raspberry coulis. Maxwell barely glanced at the artful creation. "Finally decided to know your place, I see." Instead of retreating, Elise remained beside the table. "My place has always been clear to me, Mr. Harrington. I'm a chef, an entrepreneur, and a mentor. Which of those roles concerns you?" The question, polite but direct, caught him off guard. Several nearby conversations paused as people tuned into the exchange. "This is hardly the time for clarity?" "I disagree," Elise continued smoothly. "Clarity seems especially important when discussing standards and qualifications, as you've been doing throughout the evening." Maxwell's jaw tightened. Catherine appeared suddenly at Elise's side. "Perhaps we should save this discussion for after the event," she suggested nervously. "An excellent suggestion," Elise agreed. "Documentation and transparency benefit everyone. Speaking of which, I believe Mr. Harrington is scheduled to make closing remarks." The subtle redirection worked. Maxwell moved toward the podium, irritation evident in his rigid posture. As he addressed the crowd about Harrington Technology's commitment to educational excellence, Elise observed the room's dynamics shifting. The confident assertions that had commanded respect earlier now seemed hollow against the backdrop of his demonstrated behavior. When he announced his company's intention to review mentorship programs for quality control, the implied threat was unmistakable. Elise caught Catherine's nervous glance, James's warning headshake, Zoe's concerned expression. The volume of murmurs gradually increased as Maxwell continued. The scent of expensive cologne mingled with tension in the air. Elise noticed several influential guests exchanging glances as Maxwell spoke, their expressions increasingly troubled. "Which is why I'm pleased to announce that Harrington Technologies will be taking a more active role in the mentorship programs we support," Maxwell continued. "My team will personally review all curriculum and selection processes for quality control." Catherine's smile remained fixed, but her eyes betrayed nervousness as she recognized the implicit threat. Control disguised as generosity. From the side of the room, James caught Elise's attention, subtly shaking his head in warning. "Don't give him ammunition." "Before we conclude," Maxwell added, "I'd like to thank the kitchen staff for their efforts tonight. Would the culinary lead care to say a few words?" His tone made clear he expected brief, deferential acknowledgement. Thank you, Mr. Harrington, Elise said as she approached the podium. The solid wood beneath her fingertips grounded her as she faced the crowd of influential donors, critics, and industry leaders. She began graciously, acknowledging her team and the mentorship students who had contributed to the evening's success. The subtle change in the room's temperature was almost palpable as attention focused fully on her measured, articulate delivery. Programs like these matter deeply, she continued, not just for individual students, but for our industry as a whole. The data supports this. Diversified culinary leadership has shown a 27% increase in innovation and a 32% improvement in customer satisfaction across markets. Maxwell shifted, stepping slightly forward. Let's keep politics out of charity, shall we? I'm sure everyone is eager for the final donation tally. Actually, Elise continued calmly, I have data directly from your company, Mr. Harrington. The room stilled. Maxwell froze mid-step. As some of you may know, I've been consulting on industry-wide inclusion initiatives for the past 6 months. Harrington Hospitality Group, your subsidiary that manages 17 restaurant properties nationwide, was kind enough to provide comprehensive employment and advancement statistics. Maxwell's face tightened. This is hardly the appropriate venue. The appropriate venue for facts? Elise countered, her voice still measured. The same facts your company provided to industry regulators? She clicked to the next slide, which had been programmed into the presentation system earlier that day. A simple graph appeared, showing hiring and advancement rates broken down by demographics. When diverse leadership is implemented, profits increase by an average of 21% within 2 years, Elise continued. Your own company's data confirms this in the 4 properties where you've diversified management. Maxwell's complexion reddened. Who do you think you are to lecture me about my business? Elise met his gaze steadily and delivered the 5 words that would become legendary. Someone you shouldn't have underestimated. The deafening silence that followed seemed to suspend time itself. Maxwell reached for his water glass, a slight tremor visible in his hand. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, Elise continued. I'm here because excellence in our industry requires truth. And the truth is, talent doesn't have a single face, voice, or background. She clicked to the next slide. Her official appointment letter to chair the James Beard Foundation's new Industry Accountability Initiative. This appointment becomes public next week, Elise explained. Several board members here tonight were part of the selection committee. She nodded toward 2 prominent restaurateurs who returned slight nods of confirmation. The initiative will establish industry-wide benchmarks for equitable practices, with compliance auditing beginning next quarter. Companies meeting these standards will receive certification that consumers increasingly demand. Catherine stepped forward, clearing her throat. As some board members already know, our foundation has been reviewing this information as part of our own governance evaluation. Maxwell's eyes darted between them. This is a publicity stunt. You've manipulated selective data to push an agenda. The data speaks for itself, Elise replied. As do the 7 discrimination lawsuits quietly settled by Harrington subsidiaries in the past 3 years. Cases I've been asked to review as part of developing industry-wide harassment prevention protocols. The collective intake of breath swept through the room. Jordan Pierce, the food critic Elise had texted earlier, was typing rapidly on his phone. My agenda is simple, Elise continued, straightening her shoulders as her full power became evident. Every person deserves to be judged on their work, not preconceptions. Every kitchen deserves leadership that values excellence in all its forms. She gestured toward the back of the room, where Zoe and the other mentees had emerged from the kitchen, standing tall behind their mentor. These young chefs represent the future of our industry. They deserve better than what many of us experienced. James stepped forward from the side of the room. I can personally attest to the patterns Elise has documented. 10 years ago, I was removed as head chef from a Harrington property despite achieving a Michelin star, only to be replaced by a less qualified chef from Mr. Harrington's social circle. Maxwell's face contorted with rage. This is absurd. You've orchestrated this ambush to present facts, Elise interrupted calmly. The same facts documented in the report being published next month, which several journalists in this room have already received advance copies of. She turned to address the entire audience. This isn't about one person or one company. It's about an industry at a crossroads. We can evolve together, or companies can be dragged into compliance one lawsuit at a time. Another board member, an older woman whom Elise recognized as a pioneering female restaurateur, stood from her table. I've reviewed the preliminary findings of Chef Morgan's research. The methodology is sound, and the conclusions are difficult but necessary for us to address as an industry. Maxwell stormed toward the exit, his shoulder catching a champagne tower as he passed. Crystal glasses cascaded down in a shower of expensive champagne, the crash punctuating his departure like an exclamation mark. In the strange lightness that followed his exit, Catherine reclaimed the podium. I believe this presents an excellent opportunity to announce that our board will be conducting a comprehensive review of our own practices and partnerships. She turned to Elise with newfound respect in her eyes. And I'd like to properly acknowledge Chef Elise Morgan and her team from Savory Root, whose extraordinary contribution to tonight's event extends far beyond the exceptional meal we've enjoyed. Applause, tentative at first, then growing stronger, filled the room. Elise caught Zoe's eye across the crowd. The young chef's face shone with a mixture of awe and vindication. As the formal program concluded, guests surrounded Elise, business cards extended, congratulations offered. Jordan Pierce approached with his recorder. Chef Morgan, I'd appreciate a few minutes when you have time. I think there's a story here that needs telling. I'd be happy to contribute, Elise replied. But this isn't about me. It's about addressing systemic issues that affect countless talented professionals. That's precisely why it matters, Pierce replied. Individual stories illuminate systemic problems in ways statistics alone cannot. As the crowd began to disperse, Catherine approached with two board members. Elise, we'd like to discuss expanding the mentorship program. It seems we've been underutilizing a valuable resource. You. Elise nodded, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the vindication washing through her. I'd welcome that conversation. My priority remains creating sustainable opportunities for talented students who might otherwise be overlooked. Later, as the staff began breakdown and cleanup, James found Elise in the kitchen, supervising the mentees. That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen, he said quietly. Sometimes they're the same thing, Elise replied. But it wasn't impulsive. Every claim was documented, every statistic verified. You've been planning this, James realized. For how long? I wasn't planning this specific confrontation, Elise corrected. But I've been documenting patterns for years. Tonight, the situation demanded using that documentation. Zoe approached, still buzzing with energy. Chef, everyone's talking about what happened. It was like, she searched for words, like watching someone win a championship with perfect technique. Elise smiled. The technique matters. Remember that. Not just in cooking, but in creating change. Elise's phone buzzed at 5:43 a.m., jolting her awake. The warm sunlight was just beginning to stream through her kitchen window as she scrolled through an overwhelming flood of notifications. What had started as industry news had erupted into something much larger overnight. The Tribune's headline glowed on her screen. Chef serves justice. Accountability on the menu at elite fundraiser. Jordan Pierce's article detailed the confrontation with surprising accuracy, including quotes from multiple attendees confirming Maxwell's behavior throughout the evening. Someone you shouldn't have underestimated was trending on 3 social media platforms. Video clips from the kitchen documentation had found their way online. Apparently, the mentees hadn't been the only ones recording. A text from Catherine. Emergency board meeting called for 10 a.m. Maxwell demanding your removal from future events. 7 board members already contacted me opposing him. We stand with you. Amara padded into the kitchen in pajamas, hair wrapped in a satin scarf. Mom, you're famous. She held up her phone showing a viral video clip. My friends are losing their minds. The comforting weight of her daughter's proud hug centered Elise amid the chaos. "I did what needed doing, that's all." "You did what you always taught me to do," Amara countered. "Prepare, document, and stand your ground." Elise's phone rang, James calling. "Have you seen the market opening?" he asked without preamble. "No, why?" Harrington Tech stock dropped 8 points in the first 5 minutes. Investors are questioning leadership after 3 major restaurant groups announced they're reviewing their partnerships with Harrington Properties. "That wasn't my intention," Elise replied, though she wasn't entirely surprised. Markets responded to risk, and Maxwell had just become a liability. Intention or not, it's happening," James continued. "And there's more. The James Beard Foundation is moving up the announcement of your appointment. They're releasing it today instead of next week." By noon, Elise had declined 14 interview requests and accepted 1, with a respected industry publication known for substantive reporting. She insisted the focus remain on the initiative's goals rather than personal conflict. "This isn't about one confrontation," she explained to the journalist. "It's about measurable standards that benefit everyone, businesses, workers, and customers alike." When asked about Maxwell's accusation that she had orchestrated an ambush, Elise replied simply, "I prepared thoroughly for a presentation on industry data. Mr. Harrington's reaction was his choice." The journalist pressed, "Some would say you deliberately provoked him." "By existing professionally in my field?" Elise raised an eyebrow. "By presenting documented facts? If excellence from unexpected sources feels like provocation, that reveals more about the observer than the observed." By evening, Savory Root's reservation system had crashed from the volume of booking attempts. Regular customers texted concerns about still being able to get tables, while major hospitality groups sent meeting requests to discuss consulting opportunities. Catherine called with an update. Maxwell resigned from the board an hour ago. His PR team released a statement about focusing on core business interests. "And the mentorship program?" Elise asked. "The board voted unanimously to expand funding by 30%, Catherine replied, her voice warm with genuine enthusiasm for perhaps the first time since Elise had known her. "And they'd like to discuss bringing you on as program director with a significant budget increase." 3 days later, Maxwell's company announced a complete overhaul of their diversity initiatives, hiring an external consulting firm to review practices across all subsidiaries. The press release made no mention of the gala incident, but the timing spoke volumes. Elise received an email from Maxwell's chief legal counsel requesting a private meeting, which she agreed to only on the condition that her own attorney attend. The discussion was brief and one-sided. They wanted to know what it would take to keep certain details from the initiative's forthcoming report. "The report will include all substantiated data presented objectively," Elise responded. "Companies demonstrating genuine reform efforts will be noted accordingly. The goal is improvement, not punishment." The attorney's expression revealed momentary surprise before returning to professional neutrality. They had clearly expected demands, negotiations, perhaps even retribution. Elise's commitment to systemic change rather than personal vindication didn't fit their anticipated scenario. As she left the sleek downtown law office, Elise felt a strange sense of closure. This had never been about taking down one man. It was about raising standards for everyone. 1 week after the gala, Zoe arrived at Savory Root clutching an envelope. "I got it!" she exclaimed, waving an acceptance letter from the Culinary Institute of America. "Full scholarship!" The fresh paint smell lingered in Elise's office as she hugged her protégé. 2 other prestigious culinary schools had reached out directly about offering scholarships to mentorship students, and 3 restaurant groups had committed to guaranteed internship placements. "Your recommendation letter must have been amazing," Zoe said. "Your talent spoke for itself," Elise replied. "I just made sure they were listening." That evening, as service began at Savory Root, Elise noticed something different in her kitchen. The rhythm remained the same, the controlled chaos of tickets, the precise choreography of cooks and servers, but the energy had transformed. Her team moved with renewed purpose, pride evident in their focused execution. The sous chef caught her thoughtful expression. Everything okay, chef? Elise nodded, surveying her diverse, talented team, preparing for a fully booked service. Everything is exactly as it should be. 2 weeks after the gala, Elise sat in her small office reviewing applications for the expanded mentorship program. The stack had tripled since the incident, with aspiring chefs from across the country seeking to join a program that now represented more than culinary training. It symbolized dignity and possibility. A knock at her door interrupted her review. James entered with a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Have you seen this?" He laid the business section before her. The headline read, "Harrington Tech Board restructures leadership amid allegations of discriminatory practices," and the article detailed how shareholders had called for governance changes following revelations of systematic inequities across Harrington subsidiaries. Maxwell remained CEO, but had been stripped of his chairmanship, with a diverse slate of new board members appointed to modernize corporate culture. "This is just the beginning," James said. 3 other major hospitality groups have announced diversity audits this week. People are scared of being the next Harrington. "Fear shouldn't be the motivator," Elise replied. "Data showing increased profitability and innovation should be." "Maybe," James acknowledged. "But sometimes fear of consequences creates space for education about benefits." Later that day, Elise received an unexpected call from a culinary school dean. "Chef Morgan, we're revising our curriculum to include business ethics and inclusive leadership. Would you consider guest lecturing next semester?" Similar requests followed, from hospitality management programs, restaurant associations, even corporate training departments. The incident had sparked conversations far beyond its immediate context. 1 month after the gala, Elise stood before the first official meeting of the Industry Accountability Initiative Committee. 20 industry leaders, chefs, restaurateurs, hospitality executives, and workforce advocates gathered to establish benchmarks for what would become a voluntary certification program. "Our goal isn't punishment or public shaming," Elise clarified. "It's creating measurable standards that benefit everyone in the ecosystem, from dishwashers to investors. The data clearly shows that equitable workplaces outperform their counterparts on every metric that matters." The certification program would evaluate hiring practices, advancement patterns, wage equity, and workplace culture using objective measurements rather than subjective intentions. Companies meeting standards would receive certification that increasingly conscious consumers could recognize. By the 2-month mark, the first wave of early adopters had begun the certification process. What had started as reputational damage control evolved into genuine competition for recognition as industry leaders. "This is how systemic change happens," Elise explained to Amara one evening as they reviewed her Stanford scholarship package. "Not through individual heroics, but through creating systems that reward better behavior." "Is that why you didn't go after Maxwell personally?" Amara asked. "You could have made it all about him being racist." "Because it was never about just him," Elise replied. "He's a symptom, not the cause. And treating symptoms without addressing causes guarantees the disease will return." "Very philosophical, Mom," Amara teased, "but also very strategic." "I learned from the best," Elise smiled, thinking of her grandmother's quiet wisdom. "Sometimes you need to let them believe they're winning until they've already lost." 3 months later, Elise surveyed the transformed industrial kitchen where 24 students from the expanded mentorship program practiced their techniques. The harmonious symphony of knives chopping and pans sizzling filled the space with productive energy. The familiar comfort of her chef's coat now felt like armor, earned through battles many never saw but all benefited from. "Fold from the center out," she demonstrated to a young man struggling with his pastry technique. "Feel the resistance, don't fight it." Across the room, Zoe was helping another student master a complex sauce reduction. In 6 weeks, she would begin her formal training at the Culinary Institute, though she already showed the confidence of a seasoned chef. Amara burst through the door, waving an envelope. "It came!" The kitchen paused as Elise opened her daughter's college acceptance letter. Stanford. Full scholarship. The words blurred as pride swelled in her chest. Like mother, like daughter, James commented from the doorway, where he'd arrived to guest lecture on sauce foundations. Breaking barriers runs in the family. News of Maxwell's reduced circumstances circulated through industry channels without Elise having to follow it. His company had been restructured under investor pressure, with a new CEO publicly committed to reform. The quarterly financial reports showed the changes were already improving profitability, vindicating Elise's data-driven approach. That evening, Elise hosted a special dinner featuring signature dishes from the program graduates. Each plate told a story of cultural heritage, technical excellence, and personal vision. Food critics from 3 major publications attended, their reviews already drafted in glowing terms. Between courses, Elise addressed the intimate gathering of industry leaders, students, and supporters. She avoided grand pronouncements, letting the exceptional food make her strongest arguments. Only at the end did she offer a single observation. Dignity isn't given or taken, it's claimed through truth and perseverance. The Industry Accountability Initiative had certified its first 30 restaurants, with over 200 more undergoing the evaluation process. Consumers increasingly sought out the certification emblem when making dining choices. As the evening wound down, Elise stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, the threshold between public perception and behind-the-scenes reality. From this vantage point, she could see both worlds clearly, and for perhaps the first time, felt they might eventually align. Did this story of quiet power and strategic excellence resonate with you? Has someone in your life transformed discrimination into determination? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every kitchen, office, classroom, and boardroom has its Elise. Someone who refuses to let others define their worth. Someone who brings receipts when others bring assumptions. If you know someone who should never be underestimated, tag them and share this video. Let them know they're not alone in navigating spaces that weren't designed for them. For more powerful Black stories that illuminate the complexity of real-life stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and join the Beat Stories community. We deliver touching stories that reveal the strength, strategy, and resilience behind every triumph against systemic barriers. Don't forget to like this video if you believe the most revolutionary act is excellence in spaces where your excellence wasn't anticipated. Remember, your story matters. Your excellence speaks. And sometimes, 5 perfect words can change everything. Beat Stories, where truth beats fiction. Every single time.
Every time someone stands up, speaks out, or refuses to be erased, a new story is born. At Beat Stories, we archive that courage. Subscribe now and help us keep these moments alive, because the more we share them, the harder they are to ignore.